I'm not seeing the live on Facebook.
I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one. Numerical, but that I am. I'm one, not two, no 33 million. I and my Father are one. We want, I'm one, the one only one. I and my Father are one. The truths of my voice that you hear show you that the Father is there. I am that I am, go and tell, to save men from sin and from hell. I'm one, not two, nor 33 million. I and my Father are one. He one, I'm one, the one only one. I and my Father are one. Before Abraham was I am. It's me who came as God's lamb. I am the light of the world. That was in the prophets of old. I'm one, not two, not 33 million. I and my Father are one. Be one, I'm one, the one only one. I and my Father are one. The ultimate thing man can show, God's identity here below. The divine God came in the flesh. That's why we do worship Jesus. I'm one, not two, nor 33 million. I and my Father are one. We want, I'm one, the one only one. And theism is wrong.
Grace and peace, everyone. Good night. My name is Sister Ashley Lee Iron, and I have with me here Brother Michael Francis, Sister Candace, and we are from the Enthusiast Seventh-day Adventist Church in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Tonight we are continuing. This is part 4. Yes, part 4 of the Bloodline of Christ's Murderers. So Before we get into it, please let us start with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Loving Father, which art in heaven, Yahweh, who art God alone, we do thank you, O God, for your mercies towards us, in that you have not left us to perish, but you have provided the plan of salvation that we may be saved thereby. And once we abide in those truths of the plan of salvation, we would experience all times perfection, all times sin-freeness. Help us, O God, as we're about to go into the study. We do ask you for your spirit of truth upon our hearts, that we may show what is necessary, and that we may expose the bloodline of those who killed Christ, the bloodline whose consciences are seared, whose consciences are damaged, whose consciences are evil because of the rejection of the Son of God. So please be with us in a special way as we go into it. Be with all those that are listening. These are the mercies we do ask of you. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Right? Amen. Okay, so grace and peace again. Tonight we will be dealing with the Rothschilds and the Schwabs. Before we go into it, we're going straight into it. We're just starting off with just two portions of scriptures, because we would have a lot to cover, right? And again, a lot of people don't like history, but in the Bible there is history, there's current events, and there's future. It's called prophecy, and we must know it. We must know it all by God's grace. And when it comes to history, sometimes it is important to understand certain things in history so that we won't be deceived with things that are happening in the present. So there are some things that are necessary to understand. And when we understand it, we would know why certain things are happening in the present. So, for example, right now, a lot of people eyes are opening up concerning the Jews. They are seeing that the Jews in particular are the ones behind a lot of the evils that are taking place in the world, 99.9% of it. Before, people would just say, the globalists, the socialists, the leftists, the elites, the Illuminati, But now people's eyes are opening up and saying that it is the Jews specifically, that race that exalts themselves to be superior above every other race. That race that is living out the teachings of the Talmud and the Kabbalah right now, and causing a lot of destructions, a lot of evils to happen upon the earth to bring in their so-called Messiah, all because they have rejected the Messiah, Jesus Christ, Yahshua, the Messiah. They murdered him. So, a lot of people's eyes are opening up concerning that. But one of the deceptions, which we will deal with next week in our very last presentation on this topic, because we have to come to an end. We have so many things to move on to. But one of the deceptions that is taking the minds of many who are now exposing that it is the Jews who are behind the evils. They are saying that they are not actual biological Jews. They are saying that they are caesars, and they actually quote scriptures. They quote the scripture in Revelation that says, the synagogue of them who say they are Jews but are not. Those who say they are Jews but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And they quote the scripture and say, you see, so the scripture says that there are Jews who say they are Jews, but they are not. They are the synagogue of Satan, and then they go to the Kaiser theory, which is which originated with Arthur Koestler in his book The 13th Tribe, and he is a Jew. And they say, look, these Jews here that set up the state of Israel, these Jews here that are doing all these evils today and killing all the Palestinians, they are not biological Jews. They are Kaisers who converted to Judaism and then eventually migrated to Europe. And that is a lie pushed by Arthur Koestler, because like the pattern throughout history, when you look at the pattern of the Jews, they always push things like that to hide the fact that they are responsible for the evils. So that was pushed by a Jew in that book so that they would get away from responsibility, because in their Talmud, they are told that if the Gentiles knew what we do, they will kill us openly. If the Gentiles knew what we believe, they will kill us openly. So they constantly seek to hide what they do. And that is one of those moves there by Arthur Koestler, to hide the Jews from being exposed and being connected to the evils that are happening. Right? So we want to start off with Matthew chapter 23. We'll read from verse 27. So what I was saying is that, it is important to understand, in light of, that specific lie, it's important to understand that these Jews who are doing evils, they are biological Jews. They are children of those that crucified Christ. And it would help us understand to understand why they are so evil. There's no other race so evil upon the earth. There is no other race that is contrary to every other country and race on the planet. There is no other race that is seeking to take over the world with their new world order to bring in their Messiah. It's only the Jews. And in understanding that and seeing that, you would understand why they are so evil. It is because they killed Christ. They murdered the Messiah. They rejected love. They rejected self-noneness love, the one who is love. So, since they rejected the one who is love, you would see that they have extreme selfishness. They are extremely selfish. They care nothing about no one but themselves. According to their Talmud, the Gentiles are cattle, goyim. And it is because they have rejected self-noneness love, who is God himself, Yahweh. So let's read from Matthew chapter 23 from verse 27 to see a principle here. Right? The principle here we're going to see is that Jesus identified that the Jews in his time, they inherited traits from their parents. And that is why he was able to accuse them of something, being still guilty of things that their parents did. So it's from verse 27, it says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within full of dead men's bones, and of all uncleanness. Even so, ye also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because you build the tombs of the prophets, and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, If we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore you be witnesses unto yourselves that you are the children of them that kill the prophets. Fill you up then the measures of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can you escape the damnation of hell? Can you imagine Jesus Christ, the one who is self-noneness love, the one who is the Lamb, the one who is the most gracious, the most long-suffering? He is the source of grace, telling you how can you escape the damnation of hell? He's actually telling them that they are a lost people. He told them, fill you up the measures of your fathers, because you are the children of those that kill the prophets. So some people might say, how can we blame the Jews of today for the murder of Christ? They are children of those that kill Christ. Fill you up then the measures of your fathers. Christ could have told them that because why? They inherited the evil traits of their fathers. They have inherited the evil tendencies of their fathers. And inheriting tendencies from your fathers don't mean that you have to practice it, but for him to be telling them this here, it means that they were practicing the very traits of their fathers. Say, no, if we were in those times, you would not have killed the prophets. Jesus said, oh yeah, yes, you would have killed the prophets because you seek to kill me. You're seeking to kill the one who sent the prophets, and yet you're saying, no, we would not have killed the prophets. But look, you were seeking to kill the one that sent the prophets. So yes, you would have killed the prophets, because you're practicing. Is not like you're seeking to not be like your fathers. You're actually being just like your fathers and practicing the same evil traits. And likewise, the Jews of today. And I'm not saying all. Disclaimer. There are some Jews that do not agree with what the Jews in the state of Israel is doing today, killing all the Palestinians. There are some Jews that are actually raising money to help people in Gaza. So not all of them, but the ones who reject Jesus as the Messiah, the ones who practice the same evil traits of their fathers, they are guilty just the same. So Jesus, I'll stop there. So Jesus showed us a principle here that if a generation is practicing the very same traits and the very same evil deeds and works of their forefathers, they are just as evil. They are just as responsible. Hence the reason why, when you look at Klaus Schwab, why is he so evil? Why does he want everybody to eat bugs? When you look at Bill Gates, why does he want innovation zero, want to cut down the population because too much carbon emissions being emitted? Carbon emissions is good. Why do they seek to make man-made diseases? Bird flu, another one. To kill all the population. Why are these people so evil? It is because they are the same Jews, biological Jews. They are the same children of those that killed Jesus Christ, Yahshua the Messiah. They have inherited the same evil traits from their parents. And they are practicing doing the same evil deeds that their parents did. So if Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Oppenheimers, the Wertheimers, all those families that we have been showing you, if they were existing in the time of Christ, they would have killed Christ too. Right? So,
Sister, actually, just to comment on what you just said is, I'm just thinking about how true it is and how undeniable it is. Because so far in the studies that we have seen, including what you have presented last week, like look like with the Oppenheimers and the bomb, is the atom bomb, right, Brother Michael? these people live on to commit genocide, to commit mass murder, whether it's by mixing poison through history, whether poison things, poison wells, poison foods, create bombs. They seem to be on just a pathway of the only thing you could point out that Christ speak about lying and murdering. Literally, that's what you could point out in them. When you look at their history and look at things, and sometimes you go on a website and you look up a person, you look up their history and so on, and you may get a website that seems kind of friendly to them and say, oh, well, this one contributed this and this one contributed, the Rothschild did this, the Rothschild do that, and then they leave out all the other horrible things. But why is it that all who we pull out so far, why is it we could find those kind of horrible contents concerning their history? Why nothing really good? It just goes to show how much Christ was true, and Christ really wanted us to know that that is the price of rejecting the Messiah, of committing that's the biggest crime committed. Right? So I was just thinking upon what you were saying. I wanted to say that.
Amen. It is true, because when you when you look at their parents, their grandparents, it's like the parents train them up to follow in that same line. Just today, I was looking at Bill Gates' family ancestors, and it's as if when you follow his entire line of family, they were in some kind of thing that is wicked and evil. So the children just follow in the very same steps. So they actually, it is because of the Kabbalah, because of the Talmud. That's their religion. So it's not like, well, okay, a parent has a bad trait and they did something evil and they made a child, and the child just didn't necessarily follow in that step. They're not they were not taught like a religion or anything. The child just went on a whole different path. No, as the parents, they grew up the child in the Jewish religion, in the tradition of the fathers, which is the Talmud. So the child is actually taught to continue in the evil. And their whole life is structured to continue in the evil. Right? So like Klaus Schwab, his father would send him to a particular school to be taught under Henry Kissinger. And we will see all that tonight, right? So it's not like, they inherit the trait and they could do something to not practice it or avoid practicing it. They are taught to continue in the same evil traits, right? And all because they rejected love. The one who is love, God himself, Yahweh, who came in a temple of flesh, right? So we will start off, Sister Candice, you want to start off with, we will start off with the Rothschilds and go straight into it tonight by God's grace.
Yes, Chris and peace, that's no problem at all, right? Now, I did not pull a lot of video content for the Rothschilds because they are such a famous family. There are so many things they are responsible for. If I go to pull content, video content, that'll be the whole study, and then we could go tomorrow and the day after, and the day after, and the day after. Right? So what I will just show is them on the family tree, right? And I will just show one video that kind of is a little bit of a compilation of some things, some of their history, right? So we want to begin with the first chart. Let me just pull it up here. Oh, they are not PDF. All right. All right, pull it up for me now, please. It's actually the first one with um Loretta Rothschild. I wonder if I can pull it up. Okay, could you zoom up? Okay, could you go up? All right, thank you. So we looked at Laurie, right? We looked at the Lauries. We looked at Isaac, Laurie, and who was responsible for Lorianic Kabbalism, right? We did a session on that. And this is another Laurie, right? Jehiel Laurie. And it is from Jehiel Laurie, from his daughter, which is on the right hand side there under the yellow kind of arrow looking thing that I tried to draw there, right? It is from the right hand side where you see his daughter Isaac of Katznelbogen. It is following that lineage that we could go straight on. We could go straight on, right? I wouldn't read out all of that. And it is from there we get the Rothschilds being introduced into the family tree. Now remember, from Laurie, we went and saw other persons, Gamliel, Hillel, so forth and so forth, right? So they are from the tribe of Judah, right? But here we have the introduction on the family tree of the Rothschild. Now, it is important to note this here. Let's just read this first one with Rothschild, right? If you could just put the arrow by it for Mrs. Archie, please. Right? The one on top. When Rothschild is introduced on the family tree from this book that we are using, Tracing the Bloodlines, right? They are introduced as being married into this family tree. So you have Germaine Alice marrying Baron Edward the Rothschild, right? And then underneath that you have his child, which is Baron Guy the Rothschild, 1909, the head of the French Rothschild banking house. Now, so they were married into the family. Now, Rothschild is from the tribe of Levites, right? So marrying into the Davidic line, now you could get people saying, they're from, we spoke about this in the past, they're from Levi, or they could also claim that they came from the lineage of David, right? But the chart doesn't show all the Rothschilds. It doesn't show where the Rothschilds really came from. It just shows them marrying into it, right? So since I actually did go through some of the history last week, but we just want to go over some again, because from where they show, let me just bring it back up. Oh gosh, where am I? Right, okay, took it down. All right. So where they show,
You want me to pull it back up?
no, not necessarily again.
Okay.
Right, thanks. Right, so where they show the first Rothschild on the chart there, right? We just want to see where that Rothschild really, like his ancestors then, right? So we could just go and look and see how far back we could go. Because as this sister showed last week, they are always seeking to trace their genealogy, and like some of that genealogy at some point it was lost, right? It was lost. So they are always seeking to trace it to kind of find back some of the lost information. And this is how we are able to go and pull some things from various places, right? Now, let's see who was missing before they introduced that Rothschild. What I should have pointed out is that first Rothschild there on the chart, was married to one called Jermaine Alice, right? Right. So, just 1 second. All right, let me just pull some notes here, right? Right. So we want to look at from Baron Edward Rothschild, who was married to Jermaine Alice. What I'm going to do, Sister Ashley, could you pull up the link that I sent? I sent a link.
The one with Maya Amschel Rothschild.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want to start with that famous Rothschild, right? That would have been like his great grandfather or something, right? So this is a famous Rothschild. Everybody know this Rothschild. Anybody who know anything about Rothschild know this Rothschild. Now notice I'm pulling it from a simple place, right? Wikipedia, a very common place. I'm pulling this information from. Now Maya Amschel Rothschild, he was the one who had the sons, and then his sons went off into different countries and established banks. So who went to Vienna, who went to France, who went to London, different places, right? I think it was about 5 sons that he had. It had movies on it. It's something common, it's something known, right? It was his descendant that we saw on the chart there. So when they were tracing the lineage, they left out his descendants because, of course, they couldn't put every last person, right? So let's just trace it up to him, right?
Yeah, they put it like that because there was the focus was tracing the Louis family.
Right, and they marry into the Louis family. Amen, amen. Makes sense, right? So here what we're going to do, right? We're starting with Maya Amschel Rothschild. We're going to where you're seeing his father, his mother, his sister, his brother, right? Right, so that's a picture of him. And go down to where we meet his children, right? And we're going to just trace it up to the point where we see the person on the chart, right? Stop. Thank you, by the children, right? So he had a son named James Mayer Rothschild. You seen it right there? Before parents? Right, so we click on James Mayer, the Rothschild. You see that is his child, right? Right, brethren, you all could see that on your screen, right? Right, so you could click him, select James Mayer Rothschild from 1792, right? Right, he was a German-French banker, right? So this would have been one of his sons who he would have sent to France to open and establish a bank, right? All right, so we could go down again. Let's see his child now, right? Right, let's go and look for, I'll tell you which one of the children, right? Mayor Alfonso, that's the second person. You all seen that what is actually selecting, right? Mayor Alfonso Rothschild, right? Click, that's his child now, right? We give you some history about him, right? A member of the banking, interest vineyard owner, finance, etc. Right? You could go down. Let's look for his child now. Right? We are looking for Edward. It's spelled a little different, right? Because it's French. Edward Alfonso James. That's his child now, right? Right? So you can select Edward. Okay? So he's another one of the Rothschild banking family in France. Right, an aristocrat, financer, etc. Right, you could scroll down. And stop. Do you see the spouse? Jermaine Alice Halpin. So this is the guy who we saw on the Louis tree there, the family tree there. Right, it is he who married into the Louis line. Okay? He who married into the Davidic lineage, right? But the Rothschilds they are Levites, they are from the tribe of Levi, right? So now we have his child now that was also mentioned. You see him highlighted there, Guy Edward Alfonso Paul. Right, he too is mentioned on the tree. So you could select him by God's grace, right? Right. And he is the head. At one time, he was the head of the French Rothschild banking house. Sister Ashley mentioned him last week as well. Right? So those are names that would not have been mentioned on the family tree because as it is his father, this guy's father here that we're seeing before us, who really married into that family tree. Okay? So children coming from the French side now, from that lineage, could claim their lineage coming from David. Right? And coming from Gamliel. And coming from Hillel. And coming from Yohanan, Asandla.
And Rashi.
And Rashi, right. And all those other people that we looked at who did some horrible crimes, right? Now, if we have to look now to see a little further back again, to see the Rothschild lineage, at least as far as we can go, right? Before the part where they married in to the family, we will see just actually the chart with the that looks like a book page. With the ancestors of the Rothschild family, that one. Right. Right. What we will see here, right, is some other Rothschilds going all the way up to their, all the way up to Yuri Febish Zu Bacharach, whom the Rothschilds acknowledge as their ancestor. Right? It is he who had no, it's not him. Right? But it is he who they acknowledge as his ancestor, as their ancestor. So sometimes you'll hear them mention him as Bacharach, sometimes you'll hear them mention him as Rothschild. Right? These people really interchange their names, right? Now, could you pull up now? Let me tell you. Right. Did I send that to you?
The family tree?
Yeah, from before where they acknowledge him as their ancestor, that one.
This one?
Let me see. Right. And could you zoom up that part again in the yellow where they acknowledged them? Right? Right? So this is where they themselves acknowledge them. Right? And what did they say here? Fibish, I can't pronounce that word. Fishlin Yuri Ben David Bacharach, about 1450, right? So he existed around that time in Worms. And it says, Lord Victor Rothschild says this man is the beginning of the Rothschild blood lineage on the Rothschild archives. Right? If we read further down, it says, the first identified Rothschild ancestor in Frankfurt in 1973 under the direction of Victor III Lord Rothschild. A detailed Rothschild family tree was commissioned which traced the family back to Huey Fibbage in 1450. The primary sources for the first 10 generations of the 1970 family tree were, and they call the sources, right, which they pull their information from. So he was their ancestor. Now his name is Bacharach, right? But the Bacharachs changed their name to Rothschild based upon a place that the family lived in. So we have another Bacharach called Isaac Elkanah Bacharach, who built a house, right? And it is from there they took the name Rothschild, which means Red Shield in German. Right? And I think the last Bacharach they could trace their lineage back to is somebody called Simeon Bacharach. Well, that's the last Bacharach that they discovered, right? Or the earliest Bacharach I could say they discovered. But that is as much as you will get in terms of their lineage. So in summary, what we could take from it is that when it came to Amschel Meyer Rothschild, it is his great-grandson who married the Louis, married into the Davidic line, right? And we saw where they got the name from. So when the woman had shown the video, well, when she had said in the video that, you know, person's name was Bacharach in the time of Christ and Boaz and so on, yes, the Rothschild's former name was Bacharach. In some places, you may even see that they named themselves Boaz, depending on whatever place they lived in. That was named Boaz at the time, the same with Bacharach. But that wasn't their name in the time of Christ. They took that name from places in Germany after the expulsion to hide their identities, right? To hide the kind of things that they were known to do. So, before I show the video, as I said, I could never go into everything, it's just too much. But things we know, and Brethren and Brother Michael, Sister Ashley, if you all recall anything, you all could probably just list it. But things we know that the Rothschild today are responsible for: predatory lending, right? The French Revolution, the slow destruction of America, right, using cultural Marxism. You could even tie them to things like Black Lives Matter, funding two sides of wars all the time, right? The New World Order. One is currently heading the World Economic Forum. Am I right to say that, Sister Ashley? Right? So they are responsible for COVID, the vaccine, forced vaccination, right? Communist revolutions. Last week we looked at what took place in China. But who did I tell you all the Epstein worked for? He was a spy for the Rothschilds. Right? When he put out his propaganda, it was a Rothschild newspaper he was writing for, a Rothschild-owned newspaper. And don't even talk about what they own. Don't even talk about what they own. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, food businesses. Oh gosh. Is there anything they don't really own?
BlackRock and Vanguard almost own everything.
Exactly. So this is a trillion. These people are trillionaires. These people have so much gold and so much money, they could feed the world's population. Right? So I just want to show one video that gives a bit of a history on them and brings us a little bit down to our time. Right? By God's grace.
Room deals, betrayal, and a war that's lasted almost 100 years. This is what happened when the richest family in the world decided to create their own country. In 1917, the Rothschilds, The trillion-dollar family that invented modern-day banking used their money, power, and influence to strike a secret deal with the British government. That deal eventually led to the creation of the country of Israel. But what makes this story more bizarre is the crazy personality of the man who orchestrated this deal, Lord Walter Rothschild. Walter Rothschild was an enigmatic mega-billionaire with so much money that instead of using horses to pull his carriage, he imported zebras from Africa just to show off. This same billionaire also had a super weird hobby of gathering insects and bugs, eventually amassing over 1 million butterflies, moths, and other insects. The Jews are some of the most intelligent, industrious people in the world. However, for years, the millions of Jews scattered around Europe had been trying to secure a large piece of land to start the country of Israel. But no matter how hard they tried, they got nothing. That was until they linked up with the super-rich Walter Rothschild, a man who could change the world with the snap of his finger. By the early 1900s, the Rothschilds were already the most powerful family in Europe. They were so wealthy that they had even given loans to the entire country of France to stabilize the economy. However, aside from their power, the Rothschilds also had a reputation for being extremely ruthless. They wouldn't hesitate to wield their power as a weapon, to bulldoze through their enemies and crush anyone who opposed them. If the Rothschilds wanted something, they better get it, or they'd be hell to pay. Walter Rothschild made the calls he needed to make, pulled the strings he needed to pull, and in 1917, the British government sent Walter an official letter promising to do everything within their power to provide land for the creation of Israel. That letter redesigned the map of the world, and if you need proof, we have a copy of that letter.
November the 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild.
That letter, nicknamed the Balfour Declaration, is proof that it was the Rothschild family that created Israel. But there's even more evidence. In this interview, the head of the Rothschild family proudly explains how his ancestors created Israel. The interviewer begins by asking the question that was on everyone's mind.
Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
The reason is obvious. Because it was the Rothschilds' money, power, and influence that made the British government fall in line. Years later, Britain kept their promise to the Rothschilds and provided a large piece of land to start Israel. And in May 1948, the State of Israel was officially created. Although this was good news, the Rothschilds were...
So you see, that is a very important thing that I did not mention. But you see who's responsible for the forming of the nation of Israel as we know it today? You Rothschild, all the money that they got. This is what they took some of the money to do. So when we see, first of all, the land wasn't for the British to give, right? I know they were sharing up the land, but it wasn't for them to give. But nevertheless, we know these people didn't even want a 2-state, right? A 2-state solution. But when we see the war, well, not war, the genocide in Gaza today, we could literally blame the Rothschilds for that. We could say that and be right. Right? We could say that and be right. A lot of things that is done in Israel today is funded by the Rothschilds. And one of the things that they note in this video is that the Rothschilds, they follow Frank. Is Sabbatean. Just actually remind me how to say the name, please. Sabbatean, then Levy, and then Frank. You can remember it?
Sabbatai Levy.
Sabbatai Levy, right? I always say Sabbatean.
I think it's Devi.
Right. And right, remember, who they thought was a messiah or something like that. And he was really horrible, kind of things he make his followers who engage in a lot of immorality and so on. And
Yes,
then when he came and he died, another person by the name of Frank later on claimed to be him and they said that he was like the same sabotage, like incarnated. Rothschilds follow him, right? But they are known to be Satanists anyway, right? So I just wanted to mention that this is very, very important. If it was not for them and the money that they had, being able to bribe the British, it would not have a state of Israel today, and it would not have genocide in Gaza today. Right? Okay, you could continue this, sis.
Just getting started. What the Rothschilds did next was even more impressive. They invested millions of dollars into Israel, building schools, roads, and everything needed to turn that piece of land into a beautiful country. James Rothschild single-handedly paid for Israel's Congress building, while Dorothy D. Rothschild paid for Israel's Supreme Court building. However, the more money the Rothschilds spent, the more problems they created. Why? Because the land the British gave to Israel actually belonged to another group of people, called the Palestinians. And that land dispute sparked the series of conflicts between Israelis and Palestinians that's gone on for decades. But we're not here to talk about the war. We're talking about power, specifically the power of the Rothschild dynasty. Whatever you've heard about how powerful the Rothschilds are is nothing compared to the true scale of their influence. YouTube has dozens of videos about the Rothschilds, but this one is different. Because instead of merely talking about the Rothschilds, we'll sift through centuries of history to reveal 5 times the Rothschild family used money, violence, and power to reshape reality and mold the world in their own image. Starting with the time when the Rothschilds invented the banking industry that we have today. And the way they did it is more brutal than you can imagine. The Rothschilds didn't get into banking because they wanted to make the world a better place. They did it because they wanted power. And this thirst for power started in 1744 with Mayer Amschel Rothschild. From a young age, Mayer lived by the code that money is power. But even though he needed money to get power, Mayer was born to a middle-income family living in the ghettos of Frankfurt. However, Mayer had a plan to go from rags to riches. As a young man, he began a money-lending business. He started with a small amount and gradually grew his capital. Though this sounds pretty straightforward, the big problem with money lending is that people sometimes don't pay back what they borrow. But Mayer was a hard man, and he did whatever was necessary to get his loans paid with interest. Even from a young age, he developed a reputation as someone you shouldn't mess with. Mayer also maneuvered himself to become the personal banker of members of the German royal family. Over time, Mayer's small money lending and exchange business ballooned into a successful financial institution. But despite all his success, Mayer knew that there was one enemy that could destroy everything he had built. And that enemy was time. As Mayer grew old, he taught his financial skills to his 5 sons. More importantly, he also taught them that success isn't only based on their ability to manage money, but also to manipulate people and situations to their advantage. The game of money is deadly, and Mayer taught his sons to be more brutal than anyone they faced. After teaching them everything he knew, Mayer sent his 5 sons, Amschel, Solomon, Nathan, Karl, and Jacob, to different parts of Europe to dominate the banking sector. He figured if a Rothschild controlled the flow of money in the different parts of Europe, then the Rothschilds would be the most powerful family in Europe. Because money is power, and the one who controls the money has all the power. The Rothschild brothers spread their banking business to different cities, like London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. They applied the shrewd tactics their father taught them, and it worked. Very soon, the Rothschilds had created the world's first international bank. This Rothschild strategy created the blueprint for how banks open international branches today. International banks exist because the Rothschilds did it first. But they had more banking moves in store. The Rothschilds also invented the concept of using government bonds to raise money for the government. As they controlled more and more money, the Rothschilds became more and more powerful than entire governments. Years later, when countries wanted to set up central banks, guess who they called? The Rothschilds. The Rothschilds helped create central banks in many countries, like the Bank of England and the Banque de France. The next time you walk into a bank, say thank you to the Rothschilds. Although, for every good thing the Rothschilds did, they also did equally brutal things, like making money off the death and slaughter of millions of people. This brings us to the second time the Rothschilds changed reality, when they decided the fate of the free world. In the 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte was on a mission to take over the world. Napoleon was the greatest military strategist on Earth. He could outthink, outwit, and outsmart anyone on the battlefield. The problem with Napoleon was that he wasn't satisfied with merely being a rich soldier in the French army. He wanted to rule the world, and so he launched a campaign to fight and conquer every country in the world till he was ruler of the universe. How crazy is that? At first, people thought Napoleon was overrated, but they started taking him seriously when he kept defeating his enemies on the battlefield. At a certain point, it seemed like Napoleon was going to become the most powerful man in the world, even though at the time the Rothschilds were the most powerful people in Europe. And so, in an attempt to maintain their power, the Rothschilds did something so evil that it could make the devil cry. While the world was fighting against Napoleon, the Rothschilds decided to play both sides. War is expensive. The British needed money to pay soldiers and buy weapons. Any delay in getting the necessary weapons could allow Napoleon's army to rush in and defeat the British. The Rothschilds took advantage of this situation to give quick loans to the British government. If lending to individuals was profitable, imagine how much more profitable lending to a government was. Even though the Rothschild loans came with heavy interest, it was what they did next that showed their diabolical genius. The Rothschilds went behind the backs of the British and offered loans to Napoleon too. By the year 1815, the Rothschilds were supplying Napoleon with gold and silver to buy weapons to attack the British, and at the same time, were supplying the British with money for guns and bombs to attack Napoleon. They did this so no matter who won the war, the Rothschilds would be on the winning side. Whoever won would also owe the Rothschilds millions of pounds, meaning the Rothschilds would still be the most powerful banking family in Europe. But their strategy had a fatal flaw. By giving money to both sides, they were indirectly prolonging the war. Each day, hundreds of soldiers were slaughtered on the battlefields because the Rothschilds were funding the war. Eventually, the war ended when Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo. The British coalition forces had won, and they owed the Rothschilds a lot of money. At the end of the war, the Rothschilds were even more powerful. Instead of celebrating, the Rothschilds had one more card they wanted to play, and by the time they played that card, their wealth would increase 100-fold in just 24 hours. This is the third time the Rothschilds played the world. Remember when we said Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo? While everyone saw it as a final battle for control of the world, the Rothschilds saw it as an opportunity to increase their wealth, and they did it in the most terrible way. To understand what they did, you need to understand how the stock exchange and bonds work, but we'll explain it as simple as possible. The Rothschilds knew that if Napoleon won the battle, everyone in Britain would be disappointed, and that disappointment would affect the price of the pound sterling on the stock exchange, because the pound sterling is the official currency of the British. On the other hand, if the British won, then the pound sterling would become more valuable and increase in price on the stock exchange. And so, Nathan Rothschild paid a spy to wait on the battlefield to see who won the battle. So the spy watched the battle from his hiding place and saw that Napoleon was defeated. What he did next was legendary. The spy sent a pigeon to Nathan, informing him that the British had won. This meant that the pound sterling was going to be more valuable on the stock market. But nobody else knew the British had won because the official British horse messenger hadn't arrived in London yet. Nathan knew something nobody else did, and he used this information in a way only a heartless man would. Instead of celebrating Britain's victory, Nathan ordered his agents to spread fake news that Napoleon had won. When people heard this fake news, it caused panic selling of the British bonds on the stock exchange. The panic selling caused the price of the pound sterling to drop. And then Nathan, the same man who spread the fake news, ordered his agents to buy up all the bonds people were selling at rock-bottom prices. 24 hours later, when the official government messenger arrived with news that the British had won, it was already too late. The British victory made the pound sterling shoot up in value, and because the Rothschilds had bought so much on the stock market, it made the Rothschilds incredibly wealthy overnight. According to reports, the Rothschilds made the equivalent of $6 billion due to that single move. And this set the stage for the next time Rothschilds changed the world by controlling how people think. Here's how they did it. The Rothschilds had amassed more money than they could spend in their lifetime, and the 5 sons taught their children the same lessons their father had taught them. Very soon, the next generation had the opportunity to put those lessons into practice. As the years went by and technology advanced, devices like the radio and television were invented. Information was no longer spread using horseback riders. All you had to do was switch on the radio or TV, and you could see and hear news from all over the world. This was a new era, and the Rothschilds saw it as a threat. They had lived their lives by the principle that money is power, But this new generation of Rothschilds realized that information is a new form of power. If you can control the information people hear, you can control what they do. According to sources, the Rothschilds secretly invested in media companies, television networks, Hollywood production studios, and newspapers. The data on exactly how many media companies the Rothschilds own is difficult to find. However, with an abundance of money, they could pay whatever price to gain control of the world's media. The Rothschilds controlled the flow of money for decades and then captured the flow of information as well. They were now in a position of power that no one in the world had ever seen before. The Rothschilds' fifth chess move is right out of their playbook. Apart from media, the Rothschilds made investments in other industries. They formed the Rothschild Group and threw money at the most important companies in the world, from the USA to Japan to Switzerland.
It's actually, if you remember when we are digging into the COVID and thing and going back in the days, you will find a book where they do the great meeting with the different news media, and we find different companies all down here in the West Indies who went up to that meeting in Britain.
Yes, I remember.
So you see how they take over the whole media of the world. And you try to make them a promise and they all agree to the promise and take them all over.
Yep. But I don't even know where that book is anymore. And I lost the website. But on that website, we saw where they use the media to make up the whole story about what was the guy name with the weapons of mass destruction? Saddam Hussein. Yeah, they had one of those mainstream media, was it CNN or BBC, lie about it. Yeah.
Their stakes in these companies gave them more power to steer the world's affairs. If they wanted to, they could influence the price of items and control the demand and supply of products and services. No one exactly knows how much the Rothschilds actually have because they've become extremely private. Although estimates say the Rothschilds own assets worth $1 trillion or more. Whatever the exact amount, the Rothschilds are definitely sitting on the largest pile of wealth in history. The Rothschilds are the ultimate rags to riches story. They are living proof that money is power, and that with enough power, you can rule the world.
I don't think you could put a figure to how much was their net worth. They could print money out of thin air. They own the Federal Reserve and they make up this they make up the theories on inflation and thing and teach it in economics in school.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I was remembering that a while ago too, how they own the Federal Reserve. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons why they said the Titanic was sunk. Another thing in history. Because at the time they were seeking to form the Federal Reserve, and there were persons who were against the formation of the Federal Reserve who would have exposed that, look, these people would basically own it. It would not be the government owning it. And those people were on that ship that night. And it's the story goes that they sent persons on the ship to take pictures of the people there as like evidence that the persons who they wanted to kill now were present on the ship there, and then that person onboarded the ship with those pictures like as evidence, and they sang the whole thing. And I think it was J.P. Morgan was supposed to be on board the ship that night. He suddenly at last minute didn't go, you know. So you sink a ship with hundreds of people to kill 3 or 4 men who getting in the way of forming your Federal Reserve. Another thing about them, you see, there's a saying that the war in Germany was between Hitler and Rothschild. Not just any culture human, but Hitler and Rothschild. But in Germany, Hitler actually closed down the Rothschild Bank and arrested the Rothschild. I think his name then was Baron Rothschild, right? So this is what he was really fighting against. It was them he was fighting against in Germany, right? So, yeah, Baron Louis Rothschild, right? So yeah, they are responsible for a lot of things. Now, with Putin, right? I don't know if you all could recall, but I won't show this video. But this is the last thing that I would mention. As it pertains to Putin, we had an incident recently where a Rothschild sent a letter to the British government speaking about Putin and saying that he is a problem for them, right? So they see him as a threat to the New World Order. And that just goes to show what they are really responsible for and how much things they are responsible for today. So I will just end there by God's grace, right? You could go, anybody could go and look up anything on the Rothschilds. You'll find the information there, right? Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so now I'll take you to the shrubs. So let me just show you. There is this video that have been circulating seeking to connect the shrubs to the Rothschilds. And the shrubs can be connected to the Rothschilds, just not in this way. But I'll still show you the video that is circulating. And in this video, there is the wrong mother and father for Klaus Schwab recorded in this video here. Right? So this is a video that have been circulated on social media. So you see, you have the Rothschilds at the top. Louis Rothschild, Melanie Rothschild, and then they connect them to Fred Schwab and Marion Schwab. And then they have Chloe Schwab. So that is what have been circulating. And you know, the fact checkers had a ball. And you know, it makes me wonder if, because you know they do this, right? We have evidences of certain things in the past where they would put out false information and then they would counteract it and say, see, it's not true, and conspiracy theory, just to make people who actually show the things that are true to look bad. I think this is one of it. So Klaus Schwab's parents is not, what was his name there? Let me just hear it. Was it Fred? Fred Schwab and Marion Schwab. That is not his parents. Right? So let me just take you to his real parents. Right? So I'm just gonna work my way backwards. Right? Let me pull up a chart. Now, if you go on, there's a few family tree websites. Well, all of them have the same information, and I just took it. So if you go on genie.com or family search, and I did collaborate it with some investigations done by another journalist who they are seeking to censor. So it is true. So I have sort of put it on one chart instead of taking you through all of that to his ancestors as far back as we can go. Right? So this is what we found here. Again, you can find it on genie.com and familysearch.com, and in one of the articles I will show you from a particular journalist who spent his time focusing on Claude Schwab particularly. You would see his website and his name soon. He used, evidences from Switzerland, from Germany, records and things like that, and to show that this information here is true. He came up with the same thing, right? So we have Claude Schwab here to the bottom, born 1938. His father was Eugene Wilhelm Schwab. Right? Are you seeing? Is it small? I hope you can see. Let me zoom it up. Can you see on your phone? I'll zoom it up so you could see, right? Oh my, sorry. That's the best I could do there. So his father was Eugene Wilhelm Schwab. Now, in one of Claude Schwab's book, what was that book again? Oh, I forgot one of his famous book. Was it The Fourth Industrial Revolution? He named his father as Eugene Wilhelm Schwab, and he named his mother as Erika Schwab, Erika Eprecht. But the journalist that I got the information from showed that his mother was really Emma Gisela Schwab, and he showed the records to prove it. So I don't know why Claude Schwab named his mother as Erika Eprecht. Erika Eprecht was the second wife of his father. His father was with Emma Gisela Schwab at first, and Emma Gisela Schwab, she was a polygamist. She's a Jew. All of them are Jews, mother, father, Jews. Right? She was a Jew. She was a polygamist, so she had more than one husband. Eugene Wilhelm Schwab was one of them, but eventually they separated right when Claude Schwab was born, and he married Erika Eprecht, who became Erika Schwab. So I don't know, maybe either he is just a deliberate lie, because they do like to hide their lineages so you won't trace them, or maybe he named her that as, well, she basically grew him up, the Erika Schwab, because Eugene and Emma separated when he was born, so he was raised by Erika Schwab, right? And that is who he named as his parents, Eugene Wilhelm Schwab and Erika Schwab, right? And his grandfather was Jacob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, right? Jacob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab. And his father was Wilhelm Schwab, and before that there was Jacob Michael Schwab, and before that there was Johann Balthasar Schwab, and before him was Johann Jacob Schwab, and that is the earliest that we could have find online with regards to Claude Schwab's direct lineage, right? Now, they are all from Germany. Now, remember, we would have been showing you over and over and over that there were a lot of Jews that settled in Germany. Someone had sought to give an explanation as to why a lot of Jews chose Germany. They were seeking to show that various places in Germany, they were not like united. So they were able, plenty Jews were able to go and hide out in this area and hide out in that area, That was one of the explanations that someone sort of gives. But a lot of Jews settled in Germany for some reason. Because, again, in a lot of countries, they were put out for their ritual child sacrifice, for seeking to take over in the finance sector, destroying the economy, demoralization. They were continuously put out, and a lot of them went to Germany. So Klaus Schwab is from Germany. His father is from Germany, and all his grandfathers going up there, they were all from Germany. So Klaus Schwab, the journalist was actually saying that Klaus Schwab doesn't even have his Swiss citizenship. It wasn't even approved because of his parents. The father rejected his Swiss citizenship to move back to Germany at some point in time. And because of that, they said that he applied some years ago to get his Swiss citizenship, and it was rejected. So that is as far as the video, when that video was dated, that I looked at. That is the information they have so far. So they are all from Germany. And the name Schwab, again, it is from a place in Germany. And the place name was Swabia or Swabia. So if you look to the right here, you would see that is being told to us here, right? So the Schwab name meaning, it is German and Jewish, it is Ashkenazic. It is a habitational name for someone from Swabia. The German is Schwaben. So it says from Middle High German, Swab, German, Schwab, Swabian. The region takes its name from an ancient Germanic tribe recorded from the first century BC in the Latin form of Swabi or Swavi. So you all would have known the 10 tools from Nebuchadnezzar's dream. One of those barbarian nations was the Swavis, and that was a Germanic tribe, right? So that Germanic tribe, when they settled in Germany, the name of the place was known as, the Swavi or Swabi, and that became known as Swabian or Swabia or Schwab in German, right? It said it was an independent duchy from the 10th century until the 1300s, when the territory was broken up. And the surname is also found in France, Netherlands, and some European countries, right? So all Jews that were in Germany and lived in that particular place, and they took up that particular name, because not all of them would have taken the name. Some of them would have taken other names, right? They are all related. Remember, we showed you from before, the Rothschild guy, he said, they keep it in the family. So any Jew whose name is Schwab, they are all related, right? They came from Germany and took the name of this place that they were staying in. It's a habitational name. So that is what we have for Klaus Schwab specifically. Now, what I would show you now is how we could connect the Schwabs to the Rothschilds. We connect it through the name Bacharach. So again, let me share my screen here for you. Now, again, this is a family tree. It's very large. And it's from jewsofrankfurt.com. Right, let me just zoom that there for you. You see that there? jewsofrankfurt.com. So this is the same family tree that we have been looking at, tracing the earliest Bacharachs. This is the Shimon or Simeon Bacharach that Sacanis would have mentioned earlier, that the Rothschilds can be traced back to, right, in the 1200s. And he also carried the name Oppenheim, from which we get the Oppenheimers. We looked at this last week. So I won't show you the entire family tree because it's a lot, as you can see. But I'm going to just take you straight to the shrubs. So from Shimon or Simeon Bacharach Oppenheim, I hope you can see it. I know it's tiny. It carries us down through some Bacharachs, and it carries us across right to a Rabbi Abraham Bacharach in the 1500s. And this Rabbi Abraham Bacharach, his descendant was Rabbi Shmuel ben Abraham Bacharach Schwab. And this is how we connect them. So the Bacharachs, who later became the Rothschilds, some of them also took on the name Schwab. So they actually had the two names, Bacharach, Schwab. I don't know why, because as we saw, Bacharach was the name of a place where the Rothschilds' ancestors would have taken up the name. And then they changed their name to Rothschild. I don't know if this rabbi went and lived in Swabia and took up the name Schwab too. I don't know the reason for having the two surnames. But this is an example of the things that they do. And we saw examples of that in previous studies that we did. They would have like two surnames. Like the earliest Bacharach, Shimon Bacharach. It was Shimon Bacharach Oppenheim. So two surnames that they would carry, right? So here is how we link the Rothschilds to the Schwab. One of the ancestors, some of the Schwab ancestors is the Bacharachs, right? Who took up the name Schwab, and from there, that is where we have the living Schwabs today. Let me know if you are still here. Maybe the rain is started to fall. The rain just started falling heavily by me here, right?
I'm still hearing you clearly.
Okay. So from Rabbi Shmuel ben Abraham Bacharach Schwab, we have Rabbi Joseph ben Shmuel Schwab. So he dropped the name Bacharach and kept Schwab. Then we have Rabbi Asher Alex Subtime Schwab. Then we have Rabbi Samuel Schwab, Rabbi Alexander Schwab. And that takes us to the 7+ generations to the living Schwabs today, and they actually have a DNA kit, right? So the Bacharachs is the ancestors of the living Schwabs today. And when I say the living Schwabs today, living Schwabs who are Jews, right? The living Schwabs who are Jews, their ancestors is the same as the Bacharachs. So that is how you make the connection to the Rothschilds, right? So, and here they have the ancestor of Paul Schwab, World Economic Forum. They put a question mark by this year because they haven't been able to establish a DNA kit for him, obviously. But the Schwabs who are Jews, their ancestors is the Bacharach. So that's how you make the connection there, right? I hope that was simple and straightforward to understand. Now, I'm supposed to show you some evidences from a journalist about Paul Schwab's ancestors, particularly his father. Because there was also some information going around about him, which fact checkers have sought to say it's a lie, but this journalist actually found the records proving that it is true. So let me just carry you here. So on Internet Archive, one moment, the pictures are loading, right? On Internet Archive, you know, there was some there was some news going around about Klaus Schwab's father somehow being connected to Hitler, or his company was awarded by Hitler. And it was designated the National Socialist Model Company by Hitler, right? I can barely hear myself, oh my God. And you know, Reuters.com and a few other of these fact checkers said that those things are not true. But here, you will actually see evidences of those things to be true, right? So here is Klaus Schwab. His name is Klaus Martin Schwab. His biography and his timeline. This was compiled March 10, 2021. On your right, it's a bit tiny, but you would see that Klaus' real hidden Jewish mother is Emma Gisela Tekelius Schwab, who abandoned him soon after his birth. Klaus Schwab's father had a company which Klaus Schwab's now, he heads that company now. The company goes under a different name. I think the name is Sussler or something like that. But the name of that company before was Escher, Wyss and Sai Company. And the father had that company in Germany. And, okay, here loud and clear, thank you. I'm barely hearing myself. Right? And that company was indeed designated the National Socialist Model Company by Adolf Hitler. But you know, because of their own propaganda and lies about Hitler and the Holocaust, and people are digging into Klaus Schwab's history and seeing that these things happen, they are seeking to distance themselves from it. Right? So that company used to manufacture heavy water for nuclear weapons. Right? That is what Klaus Schwab's father's company did. And look the name here. I hope you can see it. I know. The name is now Sulzer AG. Right? Because the company eventually became Escher, Wyss and Sulzer. And then eventually they dropped the Escher, Wyss and the company just named Sulzer and Company, right? That's the company Klaus Schwab is ahead of. And that company actually helped the apartheid in South Africa to build nuclear bombs in collision with the US Department of Energy. So this is easily available on Internet Archives, right? So whilst, you know, the Reuters and all these fact checkers, they actually, the information is there and the links for the evidence is actually there. And they just boldly say that, oh, it's not true, that is not true. Right? I'm not going to go through everything here, but this is just some information about Klaus Schwab's family. Right? So Klaus Schwab's father was in Ravensburg, Germany. And let me just go down here. Look the information right here. Escher Wyss was designated a National Socialist Model Company by Hitler. But because they paint Hitler as a bad person, they're seeking to run from that association with Klaus Schwab and Hitler. And there's actually the link of all the proofs here next to it, right? We're not gonna go into it. I'm just showing you just some of the things. Right? In let me just skip that part. Just to save time, I can't read everything, right? I'm sorry. So Eugene Wilhelm Schwab, he was the largest employer in that city, and he was involved in nuclear development. Right? He worked, sorry. Right, so those evidences is in the Office of Strategic Services. It was accessed March 10, 2021. It's in the military agency records. All these things are recorded, and yet the fact checkers say it's not true. So you make up the lie about Hitler and the Holocaust, and now your father was awarded by Hitler for, nuclear development in Germany, and now you seek to distance yourself from it. So that's just some things, right? We are told Klaus Schwab's father's company, which is his company now, supplied nuclear enrichment and bomb capability to apartheid South Africa in collision with Switzerland, Germany, and the US Department of Energy, UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, CIA, MI6. These are just some things. So I'll stop there, right? This is his father here. So the video that I showed you with, was it Fred? I forgot the name already. Fred Schwab. Fred Schwab, that is not his father. This is his father here. His father is Eugen Wilhelm Schwab. Right? You can get these pictures and information on Ancestry.com. They actually have a picture of his passport, etc., his signature, where he came from, Ravensburg, Germany. So he came from Ravensburg, Germany, and went to Switzerland. So this is his actual father. Right? That's him there. So the video circulating is actually not true. And then they don't have a picture of his biological mother, but his biological mother here. And they got, if you notice here, if I zoom here, they got those records from a German Lutheran church records. They got the marriage records from a German Lutheran church, right? So his biological mother was Emma Gisela Sharp. Her surname was Killian, right? So that's his actual birth mother. But again, she's a Jew also. She declared herself a Hebrew when she went to the United States. But she and his father separated, and his father married Erica after. So he lists Erica as his actual mother, right? Because she raised him. So this is just to show you his actual parents, right? And the parents were from Germany. The father owned a very large company in Germany that helped in building nuclear weapons, That's just a little bit about Klaus Schwab's background. This is his stepmother, Erica. Right? So, and he actually names her as his mother. Right? In his book. So when you're looking up Klaus Schwab and you see fact checkers say, oh, look, Klaus Schwab say Erica is his mother. So it's not the Marian Schwab in the video circulating. That too is a lie. She's not his mother, she's his stepmother. So they make it very difficult to trace his parents. Right? I know these things is very small. So that's his stepmother there. Erica Schwab. You have her signature, her picture. In his book, the book is Stakeholder Capitalism. So in his book, Stakeholder Capitalism, he put to my parents, Eugene Wilhelm Schwab and Erica Eprecht, who taught me firsthand the value of education, collaboration, and the stakeholder principle. So, fact checkers would say, look, these are his parents, so the video is conspiracy theory and blah, blah, blah. So Erica is actually his stepmother. Right? So, that's a little background on Klaus Schwab there. This is his brother. He has a brother named Hans Schwab. He claims Emma Gisela as his birth mother. This is sister-in-law, Anna Maria Schwab. His niece. And just some family members, his nephew. and other living shrub study, right? So I'll stop there. And let's get into a video now about So let's go into a small video now about cool shrub. We're just going to do a little bit because, you know, like the Rothschilds, we could go on and on about the World Economic Forum and what they are doing. So we're just going to look at just a little bit, right? So let me see. Okay. Pay attention.
As you know, I like to talk about this aspect quite a bit, and you've heard me talk about the origins of the World Economic Forum, the Limits to Growth report, and all of that stuff. So we're going to skip some of the finer details, but in 1972, the Club of Rome came out with the Limits to Growth report, which they quote-unquote predicted that society would begin to collapse by 2030. And the reason being, well, they claim that it's due to the discrepancy between resource scarcity and population growth. So, we should probably ask ourselves, were they just incredibly accurate with their timeline prediction for the breakdown of society? Or on the other hand, was it engineered to fit their transition plan? I mean, come on, based on everything they get wrong with their prediction models, you know, I don't really think we're going out on a limb to suggest that it's pretty far-fetched to believe that this one time, miraculously, this prediction is the one time they nailed it. So, yeah, besides that, they openly talk about their blueprint for changing the world, and are following it to a T. However, to me, the real insidious aspect is the psychological manipulation that goes into this, something they are also pretty open about. It seems like they really believe this old, I don't even know what you would call it, a proverb of sorts. And I quote, "Civilizations need a myth to live," end of quote. So as a follow-up to the Limits to Growth, the Club of Rome came out with a book entitled The Final Global Revolution. This was written by Alexander King and Bertrand Schneider. And on the back of the book, it talks about the Club of Rome, and I quote, "Alexander King, one of Britain's most respected scientists, is a founding member of the Club of Rome, which includes among its members many public figures, business and industrial leaders, scientists, heads of state. Bertrand Schneider, the Club of Rome's Secretary General, is also a fellow at the World Academy of Art and Science." So, okay, so yeah, these dudes are certified Illuminati, alright? I'm just kidding, by the way, don't get hung up on that. Well, I'm half kidding, okay? I'm half kidding. Anyway, my point is that in this book they lay out the plan to enable this agenda to move forward. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy then is humanity itself, end of quote. So, remember my point about how civilizations need a myth to live? Well, yeah, I guess they took that one real serious. Now, okay, so to understand how this all plays a role, well, the World Economic Forum began as the brainchild of the Council on Foreign Relations and Henry Kissinger. You see, Henry Kissinger was Klaus Schwab's mentor, and they met at Harvard. The first World Economic Forum meeting was back in 1971. However, it was the third meeting that really set everything in motion.
So you see, so the World Economic Forum, it wasn't like, you know, Klaus Schwab's idea and he just came up with it. Klaus Schwab was actually taught by Henry Kissinger. And we all know what Henry Kissinger is famous for. Depopulation.
Yes, the mainline speaker for that event was a man named Aurelio Pesci, another depopulationist who was also a founding member of the Club of Rome.
So we're saying, like, you know, the history of the World Economic Forum, where it all started. So it's so the agenda, everything that you know that the World Economic Forum is doing and is responsible for, is all about depopulation, right?
And I quote from the World Economic Forum website, 1973, a prescient warning on the environment. So two developments distinguish the third Davos meeting. First, Aurelio Pesci, the Italian industrialist, delivered a speech on his book, The Limits to Growth, which had caused a sensation by calling into question the sustainability of global economic growth. The authors outlined the choices that society had to make to reconcile economic development and environmental constraints. And then, Klaus Schwab goes on to talk about the Davos Manifesto, which also originated from that meeting in 1973. And he talks about how they're going to update their Davos Manifesto for the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum. And yes, Klaus.
No one gives a shit.
And well, they shouldn't give a shit because every book this guy puts out is basically the mad ravings of a lunatic. But anyway, let's move on. The main point here is that the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome are inextricably linked. They have been working at this 2030 plan since the 1970s, and those two entities, the World Economic Forum and the Club of Rome, well, they hold the same views on humanity. And yeah, it's not gonna look good for us. I mean, yeah, they're working towards the same future. You see, the limits to growth set us on the path towards Agenda 21, which of course, as we know, Nancy Pelosi helped sign us on to that agreement back in 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio. However, from there, Agenda 21 quickly became what is commonly known as Agenda 2030. And yeah, so these are basically just the Sustainable Development Goals from the World Economic Forum, the UN, and yeah, it's pretty much the basis for all the chaos we see today. From the Ukraine-Russia war to the global economic destabilization, the civil unrest, and yes, the rise of authoritarian governments as well. But that's not all. Yes, they can also be attributed to the rise of authoritarian thinking just within the masses. And the reason being is because they have instilled these core tenets to their ideology throughout public education. As they said, they sought a new enemy, and the enemy is humanity. I mean, come on, they openly talk about it. Okay, so one more point on this before we get back from this tangent. Environmentalism is not the problem. I don't know one person that does not want to solve pollution, protect rainforests, clean up the oceans, figure out a way to stop microplastics from pretty much destroying everything. We're all for that. But the problem is that they're using those to manipulate people, using that sentiment. Yes, I do believe. The most significant danger to our world is the power-mad sociopaths who will subjugate the world to their will. And they're going to do it all for their new economic order. Now, to any who actually do believe the narrative, I don't know what to tell you. Carbon markets and social credit scores are not going to change the climate. It's just a ruse to control you. Back when we were talking about the origins of the World Economic Forum and transhumanism, well, I came across a quote from a man named Arnold Toynbee. And if you don't know, this guy has ties to the origins of the modern transhumanist depopulationist agenda. He has ties to guys like Cecil Rhodes and the Tavistock Institute, I believe. He's even connected to guys like Alfred Milner and the Roundtable groups. Anyway, he said, and I quote, "The cult of sovereignty has become mankind's major religion. Its God demands human sacrifice," end of quote. Now, I think that's an interesting quote because, as I interpret it, well, it's a great example of their smug disdain. And it shows, collectively, how all of these people think. Because this idea that sovereignty is something to decry, that sovereignty, either on a national level or an individual level, that sovereignty is somehow hindering human progress. I mean, it's crazy. They all have this weird collectivist worldview. Yes, they seem to believe that a centralized global authority would solve all of humanity's problems. So once again, in the quote, he mentions that sovereignty has become mankind's major religion, and its God demands sacrifice. It's also pretty interesting because the core point to their entire philosophy is that human sacrifice is not only needed, but obliged for their utopian view. I mean, come on, they openly talk about how they need less people on the planet.
So in the session we just attended here at the Economic Forum, I think there was a sense of relief, actually, in your frankness. You brought up some issues that others are reluctant to bring up.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls. I want less on the planet.
So that's what I hope for. That we can, the planet can support something like 1 billion people, maybe 2 billion, depending on how much liberty and how much material consumption you want to have. If you want more liberty and more consumption, you have to have fewer people. And conversely, you can have more people. We could even have 8 or 9 billion probably if we have a very strong dictatorship, which is smart.
The idea that global government would stop conflict is pretty damn funny. Of course, to strip the world of autonomy and force a belief system, what could go wrong? Well, that's going to lead to a hell of a lot more conflict. And most certainly, these monstrous ideologues would deem it to be a much-needed sacrifice. A sacrifice whose toll would be paid by extinguishing human life. Yes, they would say it's all for the greater good. And actually, we are seeing this happen right now as they send hundreds of thousands of people to their death in Ukraine. But you know, don't worry about it, because, as they say, it's a part of the bigger picture. Anyway, at the recent 2023 World Government Summit, despite what you may think of Elon Musk, no matter what side of the drama you reside on, as for me, I am decidedly undecided on him. But I do think we should give him some credit for telling everyone that world government is a terrible, terrible idea. And he did so at the World Government Summit. So yeah, that takes some balls, don't you think?
One thing I should say, and I know this is called the World Government Summit, but I think we should be maybe a little bit concerned about actually becoming too much of a single world government. If I may say, that we want to avoid creating a civilizational risk by having, frankly, this may sound a little odd, too much cooperation between governments. If you look at, say, at history and the rise and fall of civilizations, that really all throughout history, civilizations have risen and fallen, but it hasn't meant the doom of humanity as a whole, because there've been all these separate civilizations that were separated by great distances. And so, say like while Rome was falling, Islam was rising, and so you had like the sort of caliphate doing incredibly well while Rome was doing terribly. And that actually ended up being a source of preservation of knowledge and many scientific advancements. And so, so I think we want to be a little bit cautious about being too much of a single civilization, because if we are too much of a single civilization, then if the whole thing may collapse. I'm obviously not suggesting war or anything like that, but I think we want to be a little bit wary of actually cooperating too much. It sounds a little odd, but we want to have some amount of civilizational diversity such that if something does go wrong with some part of civilization, that the whole thing doesn't collapse, and humanity keeps moving forward.
And yes, I do think he's right on that. Global government would destabilize the world to complete civilization collapse.
Right. So that just showed you a little bit about the beginnings of the World Economic Forum. Right? It all started with Henry Kissinger and the other guy, I forgot his name, and the Club of Rome, and the entire aim is depopulation. So everything that the World Economic Forum is doing, seeking to train young global leaders and all of that, is to achieve Agenda 2030, the New World Order, and part of achieving that, a lot of the Gentiles have to be killed. Have too much of people on the planet. Right? So perhaps I will play for you one more video where this journalist spent some time, some years, taking to look into Klaus Schwab's background. So let's just listen to a little bit of what he had to say about Klaus Schwab.
Switzerland has always been a place in Europe which has been a bit of an anomaly, and that's really where the story kind of starts with Klaus Schwab. Because if you go back to the start, where I could go back the furthest, I like family genetics, and so I get like really deep into people's history, and it was really hard because I couldn't find who his father was. It wasn't written down. Normally these things are written down on Wikipedia, so and so, mother and father, so and so, and you can kind of just let them roll on. The best way to diffuse information, if you're an elite or an establishment, would be just to give it out so that people get over it and walk on to the next piece of information that they're going to get angry about, because people do that. We get used to knowledge, and before long it's like, oh well, isn't that a surprise? Klaus Schwab's father's this guy. And and so I had to go about it.
Sorry, I forgot to tell you the journalist's name. His name is Johnny Vedmore. And it's very difficult to find his articles and videos. So like you would have to go on johnnyvedmore.com directly. If you search, it's kind of hard to find. And he has a lot of he actually, like, when people would reach a certain place in researching like Bill Gates' family, when you try to search Bill Gates' family, you would only reach thus far. He would spend his time, he's an investigative journalist, and he spent his time searching Klaus Schwab's family. His name is Johnny Vedmore.
There's two ways, because first of all, it took me about 4 or 5 weeks to definitively prove who Klaus Schwab's father and mother were through
And
like
where did you
multiple
start with
sources.
that?
I had to learn about every time you investigate a really like censored subject, you have to find databases that they have in this way. There was a brilliant German database. It's like Landschrift Archive, which I found had some really interesting like notes on there, including a note about Eugene Schwab talking with Americans and doing an going through an anti-Nazi training camp, which anti-Nazification training camp, which made me go, who's this? Wouldn't it be great if Eugene Schwab was somehow related to Klaus Schwab? But it wasn't that easy, because I found so many. I dragnet information. So one of the things I used was a Swiss newspaper archive and went back into the 1920s, because I had to go. I couldn't trace it backwards, so I had to trace it forward. So basically, I discovered who was called Schwab all around Germany.
That must be a common name,
Switzerland.
no?
Yeah, because it's Oberschwabia. So Schwab is from people from Schwabia, which is where he is from as well. Now, a lot of people would change their name to Schwab as well, like Jewish immigrants especially, because they better keep a low profile, because in the area up until the 1800s, Jews were banned. Specifically, Jews were banned from this entire area that is like part of Oberschwabia.
Okay.
That was after 1400, like blood libels, where basically they accused a load of Jewish people who lived there of sacrificing babies in some sort of blood rites, and they basically, the people of all of the areas around there, Landau and other places, all got their Jews and killed them, basically. And it was of course after that kept happening, like outbursts of this sort of anti-Semitic rage in the area kept happening, they just banned Jews from being in there. So there's a likelihood, because Klaus Schwab's grandfather, eventually I had to trace as many Schwabs as I could.
So how far back did you get on his
So you heard that, right? Now he kind of described it as anti-Semitic, but in Swabia, the reason why the Jews there took the name Schwab from the place Schwabia, it is because the Jews were killing children, sacrificing children, Christian children in particular. And the German people would have taken things into their own hands, and they would wrongs up the Jews and kill them, because it was so horrible. Now, when you look back in history, when you look at articles, different articles will try and paint it as though there was a lot of anti-Semitism going on in Germany. It's not that the German people just don't like this race just so. It is because the Jews were sacrificing children. But anyway, what we could get from this here is that that's why the Jews in Swabia changed their name to Schwab, because they were banned from the area for sacrificing children. So Klaus Schwab family from Swabia, Germany, they don't have a good reputation. His ancestors were known for sacrificing children. A lot of them were killed, and the rest of them, whoever survived, they had to change their name to Schwab, change their name to the location that they were in. Hence, we have Schwab today.
bloodline.
Well, I want for him about 1874. Jakob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, and he went by the name Gottfried Schwab, which is Gottfried is much more German than Jakob, which it's hints of like you might be Jewish. And it'd only been 40 years after he was born that Jews were allowed back into the area. So it was still pretty anti-Semitism was rife in the area, and they were a bit like, a lot of people were there was only by the 30s when the Jews were being kicked out, there were only really like a handful of really big families living in Ravensburg, the area where the actual city where Klaus Schwab's from. And so
he was born. Ravensburg.
Well, yes, he was born in Ravensburg in 1938, a year before World War II, to Eugen Schwab, because Jakob Wilhelm Gottfried Schwab, he had met a Swiss girl, moved from where he lived in Germany to Switzerland, got married and had a baby, and then moved back to Germany. Now renounced his German citizenship, and he never gained Swiss citizenship. So when he went back to Germany, he had to have his German citizenship, and that means Klaus Schwab is still not allowed to be Swiss, which is something that he tried to obtain Swiss citizenship.
Really?
About 10-15 years ago, he applied for Swiss citizenship, and he was denied because of the previous case, which was another reason why to look in these sort of archives. There was something in their family history, and this is because he had to renounce Swiss citizenship completely for his family so that they could be allowed to be moved back to Germany in 1899, a year after Eugen Schwab was born, who's Klaus Schwab's father, Wilhelm Schwab. And they lived in, I suppose they lived near Ravensburg, I believe. But eventually, by the time Klaus Schwab's father's grown up, he first marries this very interesting Jewish lady who free husbands and is like really against what you'd expect as a stereotype of women at the time, especially in that area.
Like
she was she was, and they had a baby. I'm not sure if they had two, but they definitely had Hans. I think his name's Hans. They eventually moved to Brazil. That was after they fled from persecution in World War II in 1938. Eugen Schwab's first wife gets out of the country and declares herself a Hebrew when she arrives in America. So she's obviously, saying Germany no more for her, and she ends up living in Brazil. And the reason I know this is because one of the bits of evidence that was a definitive proof was finding immigration forms and photos for them, the family, Eugen Schwab and Erika Schwab, who's Klaus Schwab's.
Yes, Sister Ria, his birth mother, Emma, and the other child that she had, Hans, he said that they moved to Brazil.
Mother going over to Brazil to visit the other side of the family.
Oh, they actually traveled. And they have records or just like in a database somewhere?
And not only that, but Hans Schwab actually worked for Escher Weiss Brazil, which was Eugen Schwab's. He was the managing director of that the Ravensburg factory, the massive sprawling factory. It was like it made up basically 2/3 of people who lived in Ravensburg worked at Escher Weiss. It was the biggest employer, and it's like it made big turbines and other stuff that was really in demand at that time because of hydroelectric dams and stuff needed massive turbines that were really a unique niche product that only a certain amount of factories could design and make. And Escher Weiss was one of the main producers of such things that we use in hydroelectric dams, submarines. During the war, they made submarine parts. They made fighter planes. They made casing for atomic bombs, potential atomic bombs if the Nazis had got there.
Yeah.
And
Klaus Schwab, he doesn't like does he deny, like, has he ever been asked about any of this? Is he? It's never You know what I mean? Like the.
No, Klaus Schwab, he does. He's very, very interesting. He did mention his father's name once. Now and again, he's getting older, yeah, and Klaus Schwab slips out, lets something slip that he shouldn't say, and then he rambles afterwards. And I got to. This is part of the reason why I managed to be able to find out the information about the second part of the series, the Schwab series that I wrote, because he rambles and he gives his game away, and he does it multiple times. And if you study Schwab and his behavior, you could see when he says something he shouldn't say, and you can see that something comes afterwards that excuses, and then that points at the book. Have a look at that, and that led me to multiple amazing discoveries. But the first discovery,
he keeps doing it essentially. He just keeps having.
Yeah.
Okay, so
well, he's going to get worse and worse as he gets
he's like
older.
80 years
you know,
old, right?
Yeah, he's 86 or something like that. 86 and looking fresh in
He
his
looks
Hawaiian
actually
shirt.
pretty good for.
Yeah, he does look pretty good. But you can imagine he's probably had a few things pumped up here and put in there, and some rubbed across here and there. Ooh, yeah. But the first discovery was that Klaus Schwab's father was the managing director of the Escher Weiss Ravensburg factory. Escher Weiss was a Swiss company that was run by the Schmidheinis, set up by Walter Zuppinger in, I think, about between 1840 and 1860. It took a long time to build the factories, and only started like focusing in on things like turbines for dams and stuff in the early 1800s. Moved on massively and became a really important part of the war company. So it was every 4 months or something, they would write up a book, these Nazis, and they would say, who are the model Nazi company? And one of the people featured in this book, one of the companies featured in the book was Escher Weiss Ravensburg, managed by Klaus Schwab's father, model Nazi company. It was doing fine work. And during the war, they got special exemption in Ravensburg from the Allies, not to be bombed.
Really?
This is like,
Why?
yeah, super rare. Because the Red Cross, the Swiss Red Cross, said Ravensburg is extremely important for our humanitarian efforts. At the same time, I think it was 694 people were euthanized in Ravensburg, and they were using slave labor from people that they had captured soldiers from the Eastern Front were shipped into Ravensburg to help to build these arms, because the factories that are building all the arms, and yet the Allies agreed not to bomb them. And they would have known what was going on. Well, it comes down to the fact that
they were duped.
No, it was one of the centers of the nuclear bomb project, the atomic bomb project. They needed to be able to you have to, if you're both racing towards something, you can't just constantly try and knock out the other team. You want to know what they know. That's where, and so they get their chance.
Well, in this part, the guy doesn't know it. It's because they were Jews. That's why they won't. We know the Jews was behind both of the world wars, so they wouldn't bomb that part in Germany because there's a Jew who was owning the company that was helping in seeking to develop attempts to develop some of the nuclear bombs. So of course they won't bomb of their own.
Of intelligence, if they both know they've been signaled by the other side, don't look here, they start looking there, they work out what's going on, and then they can start infiltrating and work out who's involved, and etc., and build up some fantastic dramatic spy chase that can come to a conclusion with the Allies winning, woo hoo hoo. And so they would let it go on, and they did let it go on. They didn't do anything during the war. They just let them try, and they failed. Of course, I mean, we know history, but Eugene Schwab was obviously worried, so he was looking to get out, and that was the first time the Swiss citizenship thing came up, and that was the first piece, a document that said Eugene Schwab was the father of Ernst Rainer Schwab and Klaus Martin Schwab, and was married to Ulrike Schwab, and it says it on the document because they were trying to get out of Germany to claim Swiss citizenship and renounce their German citizenship because they once had a Swiss, because he had once had his mother was
and
was
this is
from
after
Switzerland,
Germany lost the war, essentially. So
and he had just been Yeah, and he's just been working for a modern Nazi company, and they've just watched Nuremberg play it out. And I tell you what, you can't, once you work out what's going on in Europe between the end of the war and say probably about like mid-60s, there's just like everybody's just crapping themselves everywhere. Everybody is just in a state of panic and fear. It's height of the Cold War. We can't even understand what that means now. We've been so desensitized to it. Then it was a completely new thing, and I've heard a quote, a brilliant quote that defines it, where someone says, you know, we weren't.
Okay, so this guy just goes on rambling a lot. So he rambles a lot and giving his evidences. So I'll stop there. I really was going to take you to the part where he showed where Khrushchev went to school and how he was mentored by Henry Kissinger, but we saw that in the previous video, right? But look, the journalist there, he's actually reading from his website. On his website, you would see pictures of the different records and evidences of the things that he just spoke about. So while fact checkers would say, oh, that's not true, Khrushchev's father wasn't awarded by Hitler, and da, 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 da. It is true, right? But you see how, because they lie about Hitler so much, and Hitler is so evil, Khrushchev don't want to be associated with Hitler. So they have the fact checkers working overtime now saying, no, that is not true. Right? But look at that. It is. So that's just a little bit about, you know, Khrushchev and his background. What we saw from the family tree. The way to connect them to that they are, connected to the Bacharachs. The Schwabs are descendants from the Bacharachs, and the Bacharachs is the Rothschilds, right? The Bacharachs are ancestors of the Rothschilds also. So yeah, so they are family, cousins, right? They are all cousins, right? So yeah, he researched for some years before he could have because you see all those information was very well hidden. It's because, notice he said, it's because Khrushchev slipped in mentioning his father. He was able to go and look for his father and so on. They try to hide a lot, right? But his father, that Eugene Wilhelm Schwab, would have eventually sent him to a university where, I think it was at Harvard, where Kissinger and another guy would have been his mentors. So Khrushchev was actually taught by Henry Kissinger, and the World Economic Forum, it was actually their idea. Now, this guy said it's Henry Kissinger and the CIA and so on, but we know it's the Jews. And the entire purpose of the agenda of the World Economic Forum is depopulation, global depopulation, right? So that's basically it, you know, for the Schwabs, right? I decided to just show you his connection in the family tree and just show you who he was mentored by, Henry Kissinger, right? So I won't be going into all the different things that the World Economic Forum is doing. So that's it there, by God's grace. So you see, so they are all just one big family, and they all are associated with some kind of evil being done on the earth. Right? And notice in Klaus Schwab's in his book Stakeholder Capitalism, where I read out his little note when he said to my parents, Eugene Wilhelm Schwab and Erica Epprecht, who taught me first on the value of education, collaboration, and the stakeholder principle. Remember, Khrushchev is always speaking about stakeholder capitalism. So he was taught that by his parents. So they teach their children to do evil. So their children, their entire lives is dedicated to this to this one purpose, continuing the evils of the parents. You know what amazes me? What amazes me is how they are so dedicated to do their evil. It's not like, they make the children and the children just become lazy, laid back, don't care, not really interested in something else. They are dedicated in their evil. They will teach their children the evil, and the children will, their entire lives, their education. It's not like they just pick, well, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be this, no, they actually choose their field of education based on the evil that they want to practice. So Khrushchev's father would have told him to go into that field of engineering, go in this particular university, do this particular subject. So their entire lives is planned around the particular evil that they want to do. So that's how well, Sister, yeah, I have no idea. She said, wonder what happens if they make a child who is soft to conviction and don't want to do evil. Would they kill them, or are they disowned? I don't know. I don't even know. Maybe they would disown them.
Look, Brother Medina made a comment.
Yes, he's asking, did I get the family history of Bill Gates? I did get a family history of Bill Gates, but I did not get to connect him to the family tree. I can show you the history if you like. Let me just show you a little bit. Right? One moment. But you know, this same journalist, Johnny Vedmore, he did a history on Bill Gates and his family, you know. I remember some time ago, Brother Michael and I was seeking to look into Bill Gates when we were looking into COVID. Yeah. We were trying to find Bill Gates' family tree, and it just stopped at a certain place, you know. But then only in doing this here, the bloodline, we found out this here with Bill Gates. So I'll just show you this here, a little history about Bill Gates' family as far back as we could have reached. And then we will end, right? So one moment. Right, so this is his site, johnnyvedmore.com. And he did, an article on the genetics of Bill Gates. So, the genetics of Bill Gates, Johnny Vedmore, October 13, 2020. Treason, decapitation, exile, slavery, hiding the links to Israel, Gates. So let me just skip some of his intro here. Can you see? Do I have to zoom? I just zoomed a bit. Right? So I'm just skipping some of his intro. And what he's saying here is many people. Do I have to zoom more? Is it good now? Many people have been looking at Bill Gates' family, and they have only got as far back as 1806 with William H. Gates III. Because what happened, some people were seeking to link Bill Gates to Frederick Gates, who was responsible. Oh, but I'm I saying, and Rabbi Schneerson of the Chabad Lubavitch. I didn't look up him. But I will, we will take notes. And next week will be our last session where we have to show the case the theory to be wrong. So perhaps we will take note and see what we could find and just present something short to wrap up next week, right? So what happened is that a lot of people were seeking to, to link Bill Gates back to Frederick Gates. Frederick Gates was the one who was responsible for making the experimental meningitis vaccine. And it is the meningitis vaccine that they experimented on soldiers with. And the symptoms that the soldiers got from the meningitis vaccines, that is what was called the Spanish flu. And that was spread.
Spanish flu.
And those symptoms were spread, and to others, apparently some of the symptoms were contagious. And that, when it was spread, that was called the Spanish flu. So the Spanish flu was initially symptoms of an experimental meningitis vaccine, which a guy called Frederick Gates was responsible for, right? And the Jews, the Rothschilds, and they will be obviously funding that whole thing. So some people were seeking to Frederick Gates, the Rockefeller, sorry. So, Rockefeller and Rothschild, they are cousins.
Rockefeller was gathering all type of different diseases, was one experiment in the American army.
Okay.
Bill Gates, Frederick Gates was using to run the experiment with the typhoid injections and different things. And that broke out into the Spanish flu. You're not hearing me, you're on mute.
Sorry. So what people were doing, because the guy was behind that, name was Frederick Gates, people were seeking to find out if Frederick Gates was Bill Gates' ancestor. But when you try to find out and you go as far back as possible, it only stopped at a point in time to William H. Gates III, right? So they weren't able to make the connection. So this guy tried to search who is Bill Gates' ancestors. So what he says here is that the genetic history of Bill Gates, we begin with the story of Bill Gates' ancestry at the turn of the century in the year 1300. Thomas Gates was born in Essex, and he is as far back as the Gates family tree as I can trace. Thomas would also name his son Thomas, who was born in High Easter, Essex in 1325, but he would barely get a chance to know his heir. Thomas Gates Sr. would die 2 years after the birth of his son in 1327. It was the same year in which the newly crowned King Edward III and would lose against the Scottish in the Battle of Stanhope. There's little evidence of what did end the life of Thomas Gates, but these were turbulent times in English history. So there are many ways in which a 27-year-old could meet their doom. The 1300s is not the most fruitful time for public records. Yes, Sister, England. The 1300s was not the most fruitful time for public records, but we can gather that the young Thomas Gates would father the first recorded William Gates of the Gates family, William F. Gates, born around 1375. So that's the earliest that they could have gone there in Bill Gates' family. But however, Bill Gates' family do have a little story, perhaps you could just read a little bit about it. So it says here, as we enter the 1400s, we discover that the Gates family is from fine stock. Around 1401, William F. Gates welcomed his son Geoffrey Gates into the world. Eventually, he would become Sir Geoffrey Gates and serve as a courtier in the second reign of Edward IV. It says things were obviously getting better for the Gates dynasty before it was about to get unimaginably worse. So Geoffrey Gates' son, another William Gates, would only live until the age 35, born about 1450, and dying on the 16th of October 1485, just a few years after the birth of his son, who would also eventually be Sir Geoffrey Gates. So Geoffrey Gates the first, born 1481, would marry Elizabeth Clopton in Kentwell 1500. Right, I have to skip some reading, right? So from Sir Geoffrey Gates the first would have 8 children. Sir John Gates, MP, Sir Henry Gates, MP, and Sir Geoffrey Gates II. We'll follow, that's the most notable children there. He said we'll be following the line of Sir Geoffrey Gates II to meet up with the billionaire of Microsoft, but to understand why he and his brother were eventually executed, we should look at the more well-documented story of his brother, Sir John Gates. So it is from Sir Geoffrey Gates II is where Bill Gates came from, right? Right. So just skipping a little bit. So what happened? Sir Geoffrey Gates and Sir John Gates, they were executed. So he's just going to give us a story about them, right? Right. So Sir Geoffrey Gates managed to take control of many former church buildings across the Essex, including the famous Bailey Abbey. So I'm just skipping. One moment, I'm sorry. Right. So in January 1547 would come the short 6-year reign of Henry the Eighth's only son, who would be crowned King Edward VI, sorry. When Edward VI came to the throne, he was only 9 years old. So his courtiers were extremely influential. Sir John Gates and his brothers, Sir Henry Gates and Sir Geoffrey Gates, had the young king's heir. Sounds like something a Jew would do, right? They were the 3 most powerful men in the realm. But when the young king became sick at 15 years of age, then came the realization to all these men that his Catholic sister, Mary Tudor, would be next in line to the throne. I haven't got to establish that they would choose Sister Ria, but we know Bill Gates is a Jew, but I have not looked into making that connection yet because it was difficult just finding his ancestors alone. So right now we would have to we did not plan to go into Bill Gates, but we did look into his family a little bit. So this is just how it's just a little story about them. But so Bill Gates' ancestors, Sir John Gates, Sir Henry Gates, Geoffrey Gates II, they were, like little advisors to this 9-year-old king who became sick at 15 years of age. And his sister, Mary Tudor, was next in line for the throne, and she was Catholic. So, this make me think more that they have to be Jews, right? Because they did not want a Catholic on the throne. They did not want a Catholic on the throne. This is really the behavior of country humans, right? It says there was a plot devised by the king himself and his closest advisors to place his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, on the throne at his death. However, when he did die, the plot fell apart and Mary Tudor was made the Queen of England. Yes, Sister Ria, Bloody Mary, that is, yes. So Bill Gates' ancestors was actually involved with Bloody Mary here. It continues, over 2 decades before the reign of Mary, Geoffrey Gates III had been born in 1530, and he is recorded as marrying Joanne Wentworth, who was the granddaughter of Sir Henry Wentworth. Joan and Geoffrey would marry in 1550, and Peter Gates was born shortly after. Then came the reign of Bloody Queen Mary, and the Gates family would be some of the first to suffer the consequences. Shocking, eh? Yeah. Shocking and very shocking. So remember some of the when the Catholics were reigning, they not only killed true Christians, they also killed the Jews. During these times, there were a lot of fight fighting between the king of the north and the king of the south. So when I read that this Gates family didn't want a Catholic woman to be queen, it convinced me even more that these people were Jews. I just didn't find that connection. But we'll dig some more because next week again is our last session, so we will see what we could find. But this is an interesting story, not so? What a family history. So it says here, Mary would become famous for her savage executions. And one of her first set of victims were those who had taken part in the plot to keep her from the throne. Sir John Gates, Sir Geoffrey Gates II, and his wife, Deol Gates, were executed on the 22nd of August, 1553, in front of a small crowd. Over the following centuries, people would say that the headless ghost of Sir John Gates can be seen roaming Billey Abbey on the anniversary of his death. Yeah. Oh my God. Sir Geoffrey Gates II and his wife Deol had at least 4 sons who were swiftly hidden and had been named John Gates, Geoffrey Gates III, Henry Gates, and Anthony Gates. As you can imagine, the Gates family members, who were located mainly across Essex, were shaken to the core by the gruesome public death of their most high-ranking members. The record suggests that some members of the family went straight into hiding at this point, and it is here where things became a little sketchy. You understand? So because of this, because of this family history, because Bill Gates' ancestors tried to keep Bloody Mary from the throne, she was like, off with their heads. And yeah, she did kill them. And because of that, they had to go into hiding. So that is why this made Bill Gates' family history a bit difficult. It made it very difficult to find, you know. So you see, that I tell you, it's because of their own evils, because of their own evils. It makes them hard to trace. Just reading on a little bit, right? Bear with me. Many researchers who have been following these ancestral trees seem to make a very simple error. They don't view the evidence in context to the events of the time. And this makes anomalies harder to recognize. So you see, when you're looking for them, you have to look for them in context to the events of the time, right? And you see, that is like Candice, so we're not only supposed to look for names. Sorry, I had you in the background. I didn't know. I'm sorry.
No, what happened? My internet keep dropping, so I had to as well get in trouble to get back on. So I now get back on using another device.
Okay, no problem. So you see what this journalist said here? This journalist said here, when you're looking for names in ancestry, you have to look for them in context of the events happening at the time. So you would find things some more concerning them, right? So he continues here. He said, right, so Mary I had been left vast estates in East Anglia by her father, which were previously confiscated from the Duke of Norfolk, Thomas Howard, by Henry VIII. She would spend the years leading up to her rule living close to Maldon on the Essex coast. Her location put her just a couple of miles away from Billey Abbey, one of the many church properties gained by Sir John Gates from Henry VIII's separation from Rome and the Catholic Church. These wealthy knights of the realm were part of the court that had denounced Mary Tudor's right of succession and almost destroyed Catholicism in England. Peter Gates, who had been born around January 1548, was the penultimate generation of Gates to be born in the High Easter in Essex, a place that had been home to many generations of the Gates family beforehand. Their new base would become Connie Weston of Suffolk, about 40 miles north of their original homestead. And there is evidence to suggest that they changed their name for a short period after the massacre of 1553. One of Peter Gates' sons from the final generation of the Gates family to reside in High Easter was Eustace Gates. who was born in about 1569. Eustace didn't go by the name Gates at all. Sorry, for all his life. He would also call himself Eustace Jacques or Eustace Jayuet, if I'm saying that properly. The latter is even written on his gravestone. And Eustace also referred to his sons with the same surname in public documentation, such as his last will and testament from the 15th of March, 1626. So you see, because you know, their family was targeted by Bloody Mary. Yeah, some of this one, for example, like Eustace Gates, he didn't go by the name Gates for some time. So you know, when you're looking back in history, that's probably why we didn't find much, right? Because he like this one, he went by a different name for all his life. So we would find Eustace Jacques or Eustace Jehoetz, and we wouldn't find Gates, you know. So yeah. It says that all of his children would soon return to using the Gates name, but there were still obviously the troubling psychological scars of the recent political and religious persecution. Mary I was only on the throne from 1553 to 1558, when Elizabeth I would begin her reign, but by that time the Protestant Gates family no longer felt safe in England. In fact, they were moved far away as possible very soon. And then we have the migration to America here. So, I won't read all, but one of Eustace's sons, Stephen Gates I, he took his family to America. They were part of the Great Puritan Migration. Yeah, the journalists call them Protestants, Sister Ria. So, I would have to look into and see who they were, right? Because that the journalists also find that the persecution in Jews was anti-Semitism. So you have to take some of the things you say with a pinch of salt. But the history is good, right? So Stephen Gates I took his family to America in the Great Puritan Migration. He would migrate on a ship called the Diligent in 1638. Right? The Gates family settled in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They had 7 children. I'm just fast forwarding, right? Yes. Yes, so they had 7 children. One of them was named Thomas Gates. And from Thomas Gates, he married Elizabeth Susan Freeman. And they now would have 11 children, 7 girls, 4 boys. One of them was called Caleb Gates. Caleb Gates married Mary Forbes, and they moved into one of the British colonies in Connecticut. They had 10 children. One of the 10 children, the youngest name was Simon Gates. It's a lot, eh? Simon Gates became Ensign Simon Gates. He married 2 women. One of his wives was named Olive. And he also married Prudence Billings. Then they had 6 children. They moved to Rhode Island. Right? So that's it there with the Gates family there. So I'll stop there. Right? He goes on to talk about linking Bill Gates straight back to Israel Gates. Right? Israel Gates existed. Sorry. One moment. right? Israel Gates was born to the last ensign Simon Gates that I was speaking about just now. So that is where they go on to link Israel Gates back to Bill Gates, right? So Israel Gates had a child named Joseph Stanton Gates. And it takes us straight down to who it was his child and who was his child. And Joseph Stanton Gates, he would eventually have William Henry Gates. And William Henry Gates would also call his son William H. Gates. And William H. Gates is the grandfather of Bill Gates. So we'll stop there. But you know, that is the history of the Gates family. His ancestors was some of his ancestors was killed by Bloody Mary. So that made family records, public records, finding their names to see who they were, if they were Jews or not. That made it difficult. So we would see what we could find, but that's all we could have find. Right? So that's it for now. Brother Vedina, I'm sorry. But I'm sure there's something somewhere. As if we could find it. It's a lot of digging. And you know what the Jews doing? They are attacking certain uploaders on Goyim TV and Rumble and so on. They're actually taking down the videos. When you look for certain videos and you see the topic, the videos on them not playing. So some people who would have researched into those things and find out something, you can't find the information. They're scrubbing the information off the net. So that's it by God's grace. So at least we have traced some of the country humans today and looked a little bit into their history. And again, as we saw in the beginning, they have inherited the evil traits of their parents. They are practicing the same evil traits of their parents. And they are evil like that because they have rejected the one who is self-noneness love. Their parents are responsible for crucifying the one who is self-noneness love. Right? And because of that, they don't have love. They are empty of love. Right? And because once you are empty of love, you would be full of bad human personality traits. Extreme bad human personality traits. Right? So we have to make sure that we have love in us, self-noneness love in us. So as we feed upon the character of Christ that reveals self-noneness love, we won't be practicing those kind of evils. Because you see how evil the mind could get when you reject truth. Right? So may we abide in the character of Christ that reveals love so we can have good human personality traits. Is the live censored? I don't know. But StreamYard is recording it anyway, so I'll upload it if it is censored, right? Go ahead, Brother Michael.
What we'll have to do, we have to look into it more because what takes place on that.
Your song then soft.
Sorry. Based upon what take place with Edward the First in 1290, with the Jews in Spain and in England, in Spain around that time, when he seek to deal with the Jewish community, some of them moved to England and settled in England, taking up Protestant Christianity while they continue to practice Judaism in private. You understand?
Yeah, that's why I said we can't we have to take what the guys say with a pinch of salt because that's what the Jews would do. You know? So they would say they were Protestants, but we have to really look. We would have to do what the author said. Apart from looking into the ancestry, look into the events that were happening at the time to see if it could find anything Yes, Sister Ria, you have to type goimtv.com so your computer or your phone will go straight to it. You won't find it in Google search. You would find things against it in the Google search. Right? So yes, Brother Michael, sorry to cut you there. You want to continue?
Oh, and also the very Jewish community was involved in helping Sir Henry form a case for his divorce of Catherine too. And that lead to problems too. You understand?
Amen.
So it have a lot of history behind that too. Because you get problem from the Catholics to divorce. So a man put them on to seek out the Jewish community. Seek out their arguments and certain Jews to help him form an argument for divorce. And all that happened there. So we have all that there to listen.
So we have to find. We have to trace if there's Jews. We have to trace that they are Jews who were claiming to be Protestants trying to fight Bloody Mary, right? But we know there were three groups that the Catholics would have persecuted. It was the true Christians, it was Sodomites, and it was Jews, right? So we will see what we could come up with. So thank you for staying up with us. And Brother Michael, you want to close us off with a word of prayer, please?
No problem, but are you all hearing me clear? Are you all hearing me clear now? Amen. Right? And let us bow our heads and let us close with a word of prayer, right? O kind and eternal Father, as we come before the throne of grace, we want to thank you so much for opening up before us the history of those who rejected your Son, O Father, and had become murderers of the only Messiah, Yahweh, in a temple of flesh. And because of this bloody crime that they have committed, seeking to kill love in a temple of flesh, they have become agents of Satan for the destruction of the whole world. And throughout history, Father, they have been used by Satan in many different areas in the Roman Empire to create the persecution of Christianity under Nero and others. They have worked also, Father, through the ages in the Protestant Reformation and also through Catholicism, O Father. And their history has been a bloody one. They have caused a lot of murders. They have caused a lot of bloodshed. And throughout all their history, we have, in these last days, a combination of all those evil. Those 2,000 years of evil we are facing in the last days, being foisted upon the earth, pushed upon the hearts of men through Talmudic and Kabbalistic philosophies given by evil angels, O Father, by which they are seeking to turn the earth into another Sodom, by which they're looking to bring the earth into a revolution that passed. So we know it is the families of those that murdered the Lord that is being talked about, O Father, because they are the 13 families that is behind the French Revolution that formed the Illuminati. And we know the Bible gives us in Revelation chapter 11 the principles to look upon them for we to see and understand that they are the ones, O Father. Father, we thank you so much for bringing us to see these things, because for us to go forth and preach the final message, we must not have any guile in our mouths. We must not be found wanting. We must not be found having darkness in our mind, where history is darkened to us. Because you have given to your church too, yeah, the spirit of prophecy, which is prophesied in 2 Peter chapter 1, 19 to 21, that will come upon the church, giving us a sure word of prophecy, that when we take heed of it, it's like a light that shines in dark places, until the day dawn and the day star rise in our hearts, O Father. So we know that these things are being revealed to us, so that we can have you, the divine nature, Christ Jesus, the source revealer, and light bearer in our consciousness, bearing light through us, O Father, unto this earth in these last days. So, Father, we want to thank you for this. Help us not to let this go to waste by not dealing with ourselves as we should, and putting ourselves in subjection fully to the gospel by not returning to sin, O Father, but by keeping sinfulness at all times. Help this to be our experience as we face the final issues of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So, grace and peace, everyone.
Amen. Grace and peace.
Okay, until next time. Bye-bye.